Let's get more on this. Chris Gunness joins us live now from London. He's the spokesperson for the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East. Chris, good to have you with us. Now, explain to our viewers how life has been for Gazans for the past 2 years.
Life in Gaza is absolutely intolerable for most people. You mustn't forget that the blockade affects pretty much every aspect of life, both private and public. We have tens of thousands of traumatized children. It mustn't be forgotten that the impact of the blockade is both physical and psychological. 95% of all drinking water is undrinkable. There are electricity shortages which rotate around the Gaza Strip each day for about more than 10 hours each day. There's a crisis in the public health sector. There's a crisis in every sector, to be perfectly frank, and that's why we say that the blockade should be totally lifted. And I think a lot of people listening to this think of the blockade in terms of what goes into Gaza, but you also need to think of what comes out of Gaza, and that is exports. And until we see the blockade fully lifted in both directions for people and goods, Gaza is going to be in a state of unrecovered economic disaster, and that means that war threatens, frankly, in a way which should not, which is why we say that the underlying causes of the conflict, such as the blockade, need to be properly addressed.
I mean, with this blockade in place, what are some of the biggest needs for the people there?
Well, I think construction is perhaps the biggest, because there are still huge swathes of Gaza, particularly northern Gaza, which look as if the conflict happened just yesterday. And 2 years after the conflict, that's a stinging indictment of the international response. We still have a situation where people are living in tarpaulins, in the ruins of their homes. There are still whole families which are effectively homeless, and that's 2 years after this conflict. And don't forget that after the conflict, nearly $4 billion worth of reconstruction aid was promised to Gaza. Where is it, and why is it that so many people have not had their homes rebuilt?
Chris, a convoy of Turkish aid has just arrived into Gaza. Do you think this is just a first step that could maybe alleviate some of the hardships there?
I sincerely hope it is a first step, because all aid is very urgently needed. People are living in the most appalling conditions, and as I say, unless the blockade in both directions, the blockade against exports, the export blockade, that must be lifted. And unless that happens, there will be continued economic contagion in Gaza, and with that comes the very real risk of a further conflagration. And we all know that if it's one thing that the Middle East could badly do without right now, it's another conflict.
All right. The UNRWA's Chris Gunness, thank you very much for joining us from London. I appreciate it.
Thank you.